find them much easier to get started on the teat buckets in a group. I think most people would agree with that. It's taken a lot of labour out of getting calves going, instead of going into a single pen and having to go into each individual calf. We're training maybe 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 calves together.
This week, I'm joined by Monaghan dairy farmer Paddy Traynor, who discusses how he ensures he's best prepared for the calving period while also managing that busy workload throughout the spring. I started by asking Paddy to outline his own farming system.
I'm farming in South County Monaghan with my wife and a young daughter, 7-year-old. Farming about just over 50 hectares with a 36 hectare block, milking about 125 spring calving cows, mainly focused on production of grass, trying to be as efficient as we can that way, with the focus on percentages on kgs of milk solids.
So it's really, you're looking for that, and you've always been a good advocate for a labour efficient block spring calving system, relatively low levels of input, and trying to get as much from grazed grass as possible, Paddy. That'd be fair to say.
Yeah, that's been the focus. It's our only source of income, so we have to get a decent income from it. So that's where all that focus comes from.
Has that scale changed over time, Paddy, or where's that at?
We would have been when quotas were abolished. We were at about 90 cows and managed to swap some ground beside us with a neighbour in a leasing arrangement, which allowed us to expand up to around 130, 140, maybe a little bit overstocked. So we're scaling it back towards 120 cows, which we feel is a more manageable number for the size of the platform.
It's early January now, Paddy. You're not going to find calving too long away. How do you ensure you're kind of best prepared? Is there a kind of a list of things or tasks that you want to have done come the end of January that you feel you're in the best place to head into that busy calving period, Paddy?
Yeah, James. I would have made a list before Christmas of things that I needed to get done before calving. A lot of small things, but I suppose the main focus at that time and now is that cows are in good condition, they're healthy, and we have our sheds and our various pieces of equipment ready to go. Servicing the milking machine, servicing, teat buckets and milk buggy and stuff like that. And there would be a list of things to go through.
So it's kind of a little sit down, jot down a few notes, Paddy, is kind of what I'm hearing from you. And it's to get kind of all those things ready to rock and roll. But the interesting point there when I asked the question is you said it's about getting those cows in the correct condition. So you dry off all before Christmas?
Yeah, we had all dried just a few days before Christmas. And then, before the end of December, got all dosed and I think a lot of the stress around calving is related to animal health issues. So, I think getting your stock in the right condition and healthy and fit to go has to be the focus.
Do you separate cows, Paddy? Maybe some of the younger ones that are a little bit under, or do you run them as one group and kind of try to manage dry cow season length maybe, or how do you best manage body condition in your cows?
Yeah, well, we would if there was there's usually only a small number. We have condition scored before drying off, and there's a small number of cows that we'd be a little bit unhappy with the conditions, so we would separate them and make sure they got the best quality silage and stuff like that. and heifers in calf heifers would be kept separately at that stage, or at this stage. So
Yeah, and there's a lot of people actually saying, given there was a good bit more concentrate fed in parts of the country, up until or in 2024, even the overconditioned cows, or maybe those more mature cows, slightly later calving, I suppose that's an important point that people need to manage, and it's often milk fever can crop up from that kind of early March, mid-March period on with those cows that are dry longer.
yeah, the later calving cows is a bit of an issue that they tend to get over conditioned. And we did have an issue a couple of years ago with milk fever. So we use sweetened CalMag on the silage before calving, and that seems to have helped the situation.
So what's
we
the
do-
protocols there? A good high spec mineral for
yeah,
your 60 days, and then you're going in with a little bit of CalMag just in that close up period.
yeah, yeah, a little bit of CalMag and a little bit of soya because since we've started testing colostrum a couple of years ago, we found that sometimes the dry cow feed, the silage is just not good enough. It's low in protein, and we we had to start feeding a little bit of soya to get the quality of colostrum up.
Yeah. I'm going to come back to that test and colostrum now, maybe when we chat about your calf management. Um, so make sure the cows are in good nick. Manage that throughout the month of January. Get your minerals and prep right. And the other one obviously is the facilities. You mentioned that, making sure they're prepared. Um, what facilities have you for, we'll say, calf and cows? Do you group calf, or has that changed over time?
Yeah, well, it hasn't changed that much. We've just changed our facilities a bit. We have a 20 cow cubicle shed just along the milking parlour, and when we built that parlour about 7, 8 years ago, uh, we put a 3 bay bedded calving shed onto the end of that cubicle shed, and that is where all the close-up cows are kept before calving. So, and that shed is all on the camera where we can keep an eye on it on our phones day and night. So that's basically it. That's where we calve the cows now, just along the milking parlour.
Very good. Labor. Um, what have you? How available is it? You're at a, you're at what people might say, Paddy, an awkward scale. Um, Maybe not enough cows for full-time labor. Is it hard to access part-time labor? How do you manage that?
Yeah, well, I agree with you about the scale. It's just a scale where you don't have. We couldn't justify a full time labour unit along with myself. We've had students for about 10 years now in the springtime. Excuse me, and they're usually here from March, April, maybe May, and but then we found at weekends that it was back to ourselves, just myself, a lot of the time. So uh, I I do get some local young uh, students that are still in secondary school to come at weekends and just help out with calves and bedding and all the small jobs that make all the difference and takes the pressure off. I found that in the springtime, there's more than one labour unit needed, so that's how we kind of fill that gap. And then as the year goes on, we get we have two or three uh, part-time milkers who generally come in and do evening milkings, and I do most of the morning milkings myself.
Okay. Okay. So you do try and share out that milking even throughout that spring period, um, with relief milkers, and then in terms of the labour you have available on farm for the full days as well, yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of how we manage it, and we're pretty well covered labor wise most of the time.
Do you have rotas, or do you work rotas, or how do you manage that? Because knowing your farm, you could have three different milkers. on the go, Paddy, you have a certain amount of labor for a certain amount of days in the week in that spring period as well. Like, yeah, how do you manage all that? It's sometimes it's easier. You just have one person, and but when you're trying to manage maybe three or four different people on a part-time basis, how do you best do that?
Yeah, well, it requires a lot of communication, and we're always planning ahead for the following the next 2 or 3 weeks. We try to stick to a rota, but you have to be within that. You have to be very flexible, and with sporting events and various things on, we're always ready to switch things around to suit people. So it's just a constant thing where we have to be uh, communicating well with our labour and trying to suit everybody the best we can. It works
Yeah,
reasonably well.
you never seem to, and there's always the question and the difficulty of sourcing labor. You always seem to have a certain amount of labor or relief milkers. Have you any? Why is that, I suppose, or have you any tips for people when it comes to maybe sourcing these people?
Yeah, well, the only thing I suppose we try to make it easy for them. I'm usually knocking about myself, and we don't overload them with work, and they generally know exactly what they have to do when they come here. So they seem happy enough to come, and the facilities are reasonably good now. So the job itself is not too difficult. Um, but I don't know. I think James, you might want to ask them that. But they seem happy enough to come here.
Do
So
you advertise? Is it word of mouth, Paddy?
no,
Like,
it's I've had as regards the young students, they've come to me looking for part-time work, and I suppose
you
without
don't you
sounding too.
you don't really turn anyone away, I think is a statement you said before,
Mm,
if at all possible.
if at all possible, yeah, yeah. Like I've made the mistake in the past of turning people away and then found myself under pressure. So if at all possible, we fit people in and give them something to do, because you never know when you need them. So that's that's how we work that. So
Specific tasks, you have these different people coming in. You mentioned that they know what they're doing. Do you kind of set up that you've specific tasks for people when they come in, that's kind of their focus area, and you leave them to it as such?
yeah, it will usually after the first few days when I show them how we do things, they they will take on tasks, gradually as they become more competent in that area. They're happier to they build their confidence. But it's usually calf feeding, bedding, and there's constant communication, and they can come to me at any time if they're not happy with something they're doing or how things are.
Yeah.
So
When we talk about labor, then too, it's often it goes that you know, is it full time? Is it part time? Is there a student available? Sometimes maybe we don't include the contractor and what they can do for us in that busy spring period. How does your contractor fit in your business?
yeah, well,
I suppose specifically to that spring, Paddy, when you're busy, like you're calving cows, you're
yeah.
rearing calves, you're trying to get cows to grass, you're doing all of these things.
Well, we found in the past that when I was trying to do all the fertilizer myself, and that sometimes it wouldn't be done on time in the springtime. So in the past few years, we've used contractors to do the first spread of fertilizer, both on the grazing block and silage ground for first cut. Um, and that takes a bit of pressure off. That's all taken care of. It just requires a phone call, and in the overall scheme of things, it's not a hugely expensive thing to get done. All of the slurry is done by contract. That's been the case. We just haven't invested in any slurry equipment, and in a long time. And again, it's brilliant. We're lucky to have good contractors around us, and it's just a phone call, and they take care of that task. You don't have to think about it.
Yeah, no, and they're a vital cog in the wheel. As you say, especially for those tasks, the slurry spreading, the fertilizer. It's often just hard to find time. And then if the window's gone, maybe it isn't got done. The milking, you mentioned about sharing the milking load, and you've relief milkers. You do most of the morning milkings. You said to me when we were talking about this, you milk once a day for a period.
Yeah, well, the way that started, James, was at the end of the quota era, we'll say. We were over quota, and we were trying to cut back a little bit, and it was an opportunity, I suppose, to try that, milking once a day for a short period at the start of calving. So for roughly 3 weeks at the start of calving, we milked once a day. And generally, I'm on my own. The students don't start until the end of February, early March, usually. So I just found it from a labour point of view, it freed up a lot of time to look after freshly calved cows and calves. I just milked in the morning, stored the milk that I needed to feed calves in the evening, and heated it up with an element. And of course, there's always the fear then that you're hitting performance, but I didn't really
So,
find that.
where
Um,
is cow performance at there? Because that is the kind of the question. Am I going to do? Am I going to lose too much performance? What am I going to lose? Can I still get a high level of output by milking maybe for that first 3 to 4 weeks, as you say? Where is cow performance at?
well, it's we'll have done over 500 kilos of milk solids per cow this year, and we've done that for a few years. Slipped back a little bit last year, about 20 kilos a cow in 23, but it's there or thereabouts.
And what sort of feed inputs? What sort of concentrate inputs to get that, Paddy?
Usually, again, it was over a ton of concentrates in 23 in a bad year, but it's usually under a ton.
Yeah, yeah.
We've got it as low as 600 kilos, and got 500 kilos of milk solids in one particular year, but we haven't seemed to manage to keep it that low since.
So you don't think the once a day, I suppose, a question listeners will want to know is you started doing it maybe thinking you're going to suppress yield a little bit in that quota period. Is it kind of embedded into your psyche now for spring and for calving that you just do it for a period for 3 to 4 weeks, and it's
Yeah,
one of those practices that you're not going to change?
yeah, I think it's worked so well for us, and we have during that first 3 weeks of calving, we have close to 50% of the cows calved, and it just gets us through that early burst of calving with and makes life just that little bit easier. And
And,
as I say,
any issues with cell count then, or managing
no,
it, or
no, I don't. I don't see any great difficulty. Uh, it's just that as you go on through the calving season, you've a larger volume of milk to heat up for feeding calves, but then you're kind of switching over to powder at that stage. There are no great issues with it. What we tend to do now is we have a fresh group. We only started this a couple of years ago. I was doing all the milking during the spring before we set up a fresh group. Um, these cows, just ones that are less than 4 days calved, stay together inside in a bedded shed, and they are milked separately. And then anyone can really milk the main herd, because you're not watching out for uh, cows that have to be caught, or antibiotic
mm,
cows, stuff like that.
mm.
They're all in the fresh group. So
So do you just, and I suppose it's one thing that we have been advocating is kind of having that fresh group and then holding that fresh group, maybe not even going to grass with those until they're going to the tank and they're clear.
Well, that's exactly what I do, and I milk the fresh group once a day as well. So for the first 4 days, they're just milked once, and we store that milk and heat it up in the evenings for calves, and that leaves the evening routine that little bit easier as well. Um,
Mm.
and the main herder, hopefully, if the weather is suitable, out grazing, and one of us can, one person can milk, and another can look after the calves. So it's
You mentioned it there, Paddy. You do that milking first thing. Some people maybe have moved that a little bit later in the morning, um, to free up a bit of time with newborn calves and feeding calves and so on and so forth. Um, you haven't
well,
thought about that, or what time do you actually do that once a day milking?
I do it. I do it first thing. We start about 7 o'clock. I do it first thing, and then I have the milk ready for whoever comes in to do calves, and then I milk the main herd after that. The only problem I see with milking that fresh group later is that you then you're late getting to feed your calves in the morning, or else you have to heat up. You have to have a store of milk to heat up to feed those calves before the fresh
Mm.
group is milked. So I'm not
Mm.
sure, James. That's the jury's out on that one. I don't know if it's which is the best way to do that. Really, but that's the way I do it.
But it's working well for you.
Yeah.
You mentioned calves, and colostrum management. You're testing colostrum.
Yeah, we started testing colostrum about 3 years ago, and to be honest, thought it was a waste of time in the beginning because, but I stuck with it. There was very few cows that didn't have adequate colostrum. It tested very well, but I've seen since that the advantages of doing it, with silage quality being so variable,
Mm.
we have had some poor colostrum at times, and realized the need for feeding soya or something, to increase the protein in the diet and improve the colostrum quality. And also, we can pick and choose if we have a cow with poor colostrum for whatever reason. We usually have a store of uh, good quality colostrum in a fridge, and we'll use that instead. And it's all about it. Also, I think the biggest stresses come from having sick animals in the springtime, especially scouring calves. So
Mm.
everything we can do to avoid that or reduce that is worth doing. It's a very small task to test colostrum. It takes less than a minute, so I think it's worth
Get-
doing.
So what you're saying is get a refractometer and just kind of get it
Yeah,
into your psyche as such that it's part of the process.
it,
So you're testing colostrum, good quality colostrum. Then when are you feeding these calves? How much are they getting? How are you managing that newborn calf?
yeah. Well, as I said, there's a bedded calving shed on beside along the milking parlour, and we put a what we call a hot box in there. It was built as a a safety box for the front end loader, but we sheeted the sides of it, and um, we pull the calves into it. It's bedded, and they're under a lamp.
Mm.
Just after the born, I suppose half an hour to an hour after the born, and then we milk that cow and get the colostrum into the calf as soon as we can. Within reason, I suppose we try to get some sleep at night as well. So you
And that's
know,
important too. Yeah.
so it doesn't
You
always
can't.
happen.
Yeah. And you can't run without that.
Oh,
But you get it into them as quickly as you can. The hot box, then you find it useful. You're not. You kind of probably go. Do you move calves then? Probably twice a day if you're busy, or maybe once a day. And do they go to individual pens, group pens?
yeah, well, they used to go to individual pens in the past, and we were being advised for years to move away from that from a labour point of view. And It's only in the last couple of years now we haven't used the single pens. Once we get the colostrum into the calves and either they're fit to walk or we can hook into that hot box with the loader and take it to wherever they're going. They go straight in with their into a group of say calves born in the last day or two, and we find them much easier to get started on the teat buckets in a group. I think most people would agree with that,
Mm.
and it's taken a lot of labour out of getting calves going. Instead of going into a single pen and having to go into each individual calf, we're training maybe two or three or four or five calves together, and then they stay in that group, or they move into a group of 8 or 10, and that's the way we do that now.
And how do you manage then maybe feeding those groups? Is it you don't have automatic feeders? Is it a trolley? How do you manage?
Yeah, well, we have a buggy with a pump and a digital sort of clock for measuring, and that is, I find that's it's a great piece of kit. We have had that for 6 or 7 years now, and when you're getting young students and different people feeding calves, it's much easier to ensure that they're given the volumes that you want to groups of calves,
Yeah.
instead of just measuring out into buckets. So,
Calf space, calf accommodation, it's a big one. You've mentioned it throughout this about animal health, getting your cow right and getting your calves right. Space obviously is key from a calf health point of view as well. Have you made any changes? Have you invested in the farm? Have you always had good calf facilities? What?
yeah, well, I wouldn't say, I'd say if there's weakness in facilities, it's probably in calf facilities, in that uh, we use probably three, four sheds, and then three hutches that we set up uh, in one of the silage pits when it's emptied out. So we are changing that. We're converting a shed alongside the main calf shed and putting more group pens there, and
Mm.
almost definitely putting in an automatic feeder this January. So
And I think that's important because sometimes calf accommodation and calf facilities, it's for a specific period. And if there is sheds there that's available, Paddy, that can be converted, it's probably something that people should be thinking about. Obviously, some firms will have to go and invest in maybe new calf facilities where that isn't available. But if they are some simple kind of conversions, just to leave that little bit more space, as you said.
yeah, well, I find that the calf rearing side of it, only I have good help. I couldn't really manage it on my own. Uh, it, the routine would just go on for it takes as long here to feed the calves as it does milking and the
Mm.
other chores. But there's a lot of going around on calves the way it's set up or has been set up. We could have 10 or 12 groups, and been fed in 4 or 5 different places. So
Yeah.
it does take a bit of time. So we're just trying to improve a little bit on that and make it that bit easier.
And the
And
feeder, I suppose, is part of that, of your thinking on that as well.
yeah, well, you never know. As good as the labour has been, and you never know when you're going to be stuck on your own. And I don't think because we have good labour, we necessarily should be leaving it any harder than it needs to be. So we're going to try and improve that side of things and make it as labour efficient and easy as possible.
Very good. We've covered off a lot there, I suppose, in terms of how you manage the labor, the importance of managing your cows, the milking, the calves. Is there anything specifically you'd say to listeners maybe that I've missed out on, Paddy, that maybe helps you in the spring or?
Uh, I think if we've more or less covered it, I suppose we take a good. I suppose the only thing I do think of is that we sometimes it's all focused on the animal. We need to look after ourselves and make sure we're well rested beforehand, and that we look after ourselves through the season. Because if we break down, the whole system breaks down.
Yeah,
So that's the only
and that's
the
maybe
only
one of
thing
the,
that I can think of saying.
maybe yeah, maybe the best point left to last. Absolutely, as you say, look, farmers need to get adequate sleep, and
Yeah.
yeah, I suppose it's about managing and organizing your time. It's a busy period, Paddy, and there's no getting away from that. But I suppose from what we've spoke about there is there things we can put in place? Is there things we can do to just give that little bit of time where you do get that respite that's needed? Like,
Yeah, well, that's having adequate help, I suppose, on most farms, uh, regardless of scale. I think that busy spring calving time, if you can get help at all, I wouldn't turn it down. Any task taken off your hands is a help, and I'm generally on my own from, we'll say, 6 o'clock in the evening until 7 or 8 o'clock the next morning. So you need, when you have good help during the day, it just gives you that little bit of, you're not going into that period on your own tired, and
yeah.
it's comfortable during the day, so I can handle those late nights and early mornings on my own. Then.
Thanks very much, Paddy. I think look a great insight into your own farm, and I suppose you're doing what I would say a lot of the simple things well, which is important. So look at the best of luck with calving. You have a few weeks to get ready, and the best of luck with calving as you head into 2025.
Okay, James. Thanks very much.
That's it for this week's episode of the Dairy Edge podcast. My thanks to Paddy Traynor for joining me on this week's show. If you've any questions about this week's episode or have suggested topics you would like discussed, you can send them to us at the following email address: dairyedge.podcast@teagasc.ie. Don't forget to rate, review and subscribe to the podcast. You can listen on Apple, Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. For more information, go to the Teagasc website at teagasc.ie. I'm James Dunne, and join us next time for your Dairy Edge.